Bitcoin has made the original rationale for fiat redundant. You don't need fiat anymore. If you go back in time, if you had Bitcoin, there wouldn't have been any need for fiat. Money is all pervading. It impacts everything in society. It is the lifeblood of humanity, and the corruption of money corrupts society and civilization and culture to its core. Bitcoin, as a non-confiscatable, censorship-proof, permissionless, scarce digital commodity, is frankly the only way out of this system.
All right, Vijay Selvam, welcome to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Thank you, Bram. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome that you are here because we are going to unpack your book called Principles of Bitcoin, Technology, Economics, Politics, and Philosophy. I even have it in the background. Maybe to start, I know you came from Goldman Sachs and have like a traditional law and finance background. What was your biggest mental hurdle that you had to overcome before you took Bitcoin seriously?
So I'm an attorney. Worked at a Wall Street law firm during the 2008 financial crisis. Worked on various bailout packages for banks. I sort of witnessed that whole era firsthand. I was right in the thick of it. And I witnessed a lot of the, moral hazard and the manipulation of the system at that very early stage of my career. So for me, the problems with the system were always very, very obvious. And I became a gold bug on the back of that. Invested in gold back in 2008, 2009, and then went through a terrible decade with gold where it basically did nothing or went down while the rest of the stock market was going straight up. So I already understood the problems of the system and kind of, was looking for a solution in that respect. So for me, the journey was really moving from being a gold advocate to understanding Bitcoin and understanding its absolute scarcity, its unconfiscatable nature, its permissionlessness and censorship resistance. So it was understanding that technology side of things that needed to happen. Of course, my initial reaction to Bitcoin was everything that you'd expect from someone like me who's spent over a decade at Goldman Sachs and gone to all the, Ivy League law schools and all of that, right? My reaction was, it's a Ponzi scheme. Governments will shut it down. It's used by criminals, sort of tulip mania, all the usual things. And then, of course, I did study it. And I understood it. And then the leap from being a gold advocate to being a Bitcoiner was not that hard.
What I really like when you talk about this in the book, you talk a lot about like first principles. And yeah, I just wanted to ask, because what was very important for me actually is I looked at Bitcoin first from like a technological dimension and thought like, okay, this could be a currency for the internet. But it was only when I really dove into the economic dimension, the financial dimension, that I really understood, basically the reason of existence, right? And so many people that hear about Bitcoin for the first time think it's a trade, you can get rich, number go up, which is, of course, great marketing. But to truly understand it, you mention, thinking in first principles a lot. Why do you think that should be the first step in order to, actually understand why this exists and why it's so profound?
What Satoshi achieved was peer-to-peer transfer. He somehow created this technology that allows you and I to transact on the internet in the digital world as if we were transacting peer-to-peer. So somehow it kind of enabled the laws of physics to apply in the digital world, right? And that's like a path-breaking innovation. So that's kind of the way I think that, based on Satoshi's, thought experiment, I think that's the easiest way to describe Bitcoin.
You also talk about the map and the territory. The map is the territory in Bitcoin and the time chain. And I just looked up because the the metaphor, the map is not a territory, is very old, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that talks about that our understanding of reality, which is the map, is an abstraction and not the same as the reality itself, right? So my interpretation of the reality is different than yours. Like if I ask you what type of color is the plant, we both say green, right? Because that's the label we created for the light that represents green. But there is never an exact same interpretation in my mind, in my brain, as in your brain, right? And with Bitcoin, it is actually the same for everyone. So the map is the territory in Bitcoin. And can you talk a bit about that, and maybe also how that connects to the concept of the time chain, because that is basically the immutable truth that is the base layer of the territory.
Yeah, I mean, I owe a great debt to Gigi for that whole section of my book, because it was inspired by some of his writing. One of the best papers I think ever written, for me, the best paper on Bitcoin ever written is this paper called "Bitcoin is Time" by Gigi.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful paper. It's extremely powerful. It was one of those, when I read that, it was one of those moments when a real light bulb. I think I understood Bitcoin before that, but that paper just took it to another kind of level. But he talks about map is the territory in that, which is, I think, it's a really powerful analogy, because, if you take gold and paper and gold-backed paper, right, or paper backed by gold, the gold is the territory, right? So if I transact with you in gold, I give you a gold bar, then we're transacting in the actual territory. You don't need a map there, right?
Yeah.
But if you put the gold in a vault and create certificates representing the gold, and I give you a certificate and we transact in those certificates are kind of like the map of the gold that's sitting in the vault, right? So the map and the territory are two separate things. And in between the two exists trust. And where there exists trust, there's always abuse of trust, right? As we have seen with paper currency, right? That's the origins of fiat was, put gold in a vault, issue paper, and then gradually forget about the gold, you only have paper, right? Because that trust in between was abused. So you have map, and it's like you look at Google Maps and then that's different from what's the actual street outside your window, right? But what if the map and the street was somehow the same thing, right? And so that is what Bitcoin is. It's the storage, or it's kind of the record keeping of your ownership of Bitcoin is itself the asset. The record keeping of the asset is itself the asset. The map is the territory. It's a beautiful analogy, but it really sums up what Bitcoin is, because it's not, it's actually called the Oracle problem, which you might have come across. What I described, right? And this is why tokenized gold and tokenized even stocks and so on doesn't really work in the truest sense, right? Because you still need someone, like with tokenized gold, you still need someone safekeeping the gold, right? You can't, it's like the territory is there, someone needs to safekeep it, someone needs to record, withdrawals of the gold, sales and purchases, like all of that record keeping needs to happen in that vault, right?
Yep.
And then you have the tokens or whatever that represents, that is the map of what's sitting there. There's a gap, right? So whenever there's a physical thing that is your asset and needs to be, you need record keeping around that, you have room for corruption. You have room for abuse, because there's trust. There's inherently trust whenever that sort of, the map and the territory are separate. And that's why it's critical that, you've got to have an asset that just exists kind of, due to social consensus.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all time. Beyond custody, OnRamp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you. My American friends, I've got something for you. If you're into Bitcoin, you want to grow your stack in any way possible. What if you could do it effortlessly just by spending your fiat? The Gemini Bitcoin credit card is designed to help you do just that by giving you instant Bitcoin rewards on every purchase. Just use it like any other credit card and earn back up to 4% on transportation, 3% on dining, 2% on groceries, and 1% on everything else. There are no annual fees for this card and no exchange fees to receive your Bitcoin rewards. Sign up to get your limited edition Bitcoin Orange credit card and earn a $200 Bitcoin bonus when you spend $3,000 in the first 90 days. You can find more information and terms in the description below, or go to gemini.com/Bram to sign up today and start stacking effortlessly. That's gemini.com/Bram. And this is also what creates the basis for the trustlessness of Bitcoin, right? In Bitcoin, you cannot just talk, you have to walk, right? Because the talk is backed by the walk, the map, and the territory. Like you cannot say, I own 1 Bitcoin. The fact that you are able to prove it forces you to prove it, basically, right? Because how it works, like you said, the fact that it's on the ledger, documented in an immutable way, that your private key gives access to XYZ UTXO, is the proof that you own it, which gives you also the value of the part of the, let's call it the token or the coin that you own, right? And it's so interesting because while I'm talking through it, I think like there is just nothing like this. I think this is also what makes it so hard, right? Because everything else in the world that you can own as an asset is either an abstraction, or the trust or the security or whatever is outsourced to a third party that has to confirm that something is real or either in your possession or ownership, whatever, right? And the fact that this is actually possible for the first time ever is hard to understand, but the fact that it's digital, as we just also talked about, makes it even extra hard, right? Yeah. Because how can something that is digital actually be like truly unique in my ownership, not being able to be copied? You know, it's just a very hard thing for people to comprehend.
Yeah, it comes back to, everything in the physical world satisfies that. You know, you achieve it with anything, any physical object, you achieve that. You don't need a separate map because, like, my phone is here. It is it. You know, you don't need a map to represent it. But what Bitcoin achieved was this thing in the internet, in the online digital world. And the consequences of that are tremendous. It spans all aspects, economics, politics, everything. It's tremendously powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When people say, Bitcoin isn't real, I can't touch it, etc. I now found a new argument. I don't know who said it, but I heard someone say like, okay, so it's not real, but you're listening to music in your ears streamed on Spotify and you're watching Netflix, right? You're watching moving images and you're hearing sounds that are translated with your senses, and then you are actually consuming this content. And so is that also not real, right? Because based on what we just talked about, Bitcoin is the realest digital thing to exist, right? And I think this is a nice bridge to the economics dimension that you discuss, right? Because when people talk about money, about fiat money, they say, this is real because I can touch it, right? Gold is real because I can touch it and I can melt it. It's an element, etc. You being into gold before and now being into Bitcoin, when we can make clear to people that Bitcoin has, well, a lot of edges, I think. But if we zoom in on one, like what would be the one property of Bitcoin's of Bitcoin that you think would make it very clear that it has an edge over all these other things, of which the arguments are very strong, right? Like I can touch it, etc. Is what a lot of people would agree with.
So again, going back to our original discussion, at the heart of everything that we talked about, right? Like this great invention and this decentralized consensus and all, and peer-to-peer transaction and all of that. At the core of that is actually one single thing. It is the discovery or invention of digital scarcity, right? That's at the core. I mean, Bitcoin does various other things. It's censorship resistant, it's unconfiscatable, it's permissionless, and so on. But the core, I would say the most important aspect at the heart of it all is that 21 million supply cap. It's that creation of absolute scarcity, because that's the only way, like everything else flows from that, right? The solving of the double spend problem, all of that flows from that 21 million supply cap. And so that is the most, and it's achieved using at the end of the day, it's decentralized consensus, it's the proof of work. That is how you ensure that 21 million supply cap is achieved. And if you want to take that into economics, that's where, so if we sort of, segue into what is money and, what are the properties. We talked about, okay, so there's this incredible invention where you've managed to apply the laws of physics in the digital realm and you've achieved digital scarcity. But what is that? Why does that matter, right? And we said that it has implications in economics, politics, philosophy, every other possible discipline. So in the realm of economics, and frankly, all other realms, because money transcends all realms, it has I think the biggest implications for money itself. Now, why is that? And so you go to, Austrian economics and you ask, what are the properties of money? And you ask, so for many people, a lot of this would be new. So, sort of not a lot of newbies, because they just assume that money is the creation of the state. Not realizing that fiat currency is a 54-year-old experiment, right? Right until 1971, until the Nixon shock, the world was on a gold standard. I mean, it left the gold standard at different countries, left the gold standard at various points, but typically, the world was on a gold standard or a precious metal standard for thousands of years, right? This era that we are in now is an experiment. It's literally like, it's 54-year-old experiment, right? But why did we get here, right? We got here, and then also just, you talk about, you go back to Austrian economics and the writings of Karl Menger. Karl Menger says that the money is not necessarily a creation of the state. Money is just the most saleable or the most marketable commodity. And so what's the most marketable commodity? It's the commodity that has the best portability, the best divisibility, the best verifiability, the best fungibility, the best durability, and also, frankly, most importantly, the best scarcity, right? So these are the properties of money. So gold was great on the durability front, its history, and also the scarcity front, because you can't just print gold, you can't just materialize it, you have to dig it out of the ground, and it's a rare metal, right? And so gold was, the most successful money through human history for that reason, because it was scarce and durable, right? But it had some very serious shortcomings. Wasn't portable, wasn't divisible. You can't try. You have to say, if I need to send you gold into Amsterdam, I need to put it from London. I need to put it in a ship. I might be attacked by pirates, in medieval Europe. I need to have security. I need to spend. There's all those risks around it. Mm-hmm. Divisibility. I can't buy a small trinket with a sliver of gold. It's not possible to do that.
And I don't know if it's real when you give it to me.
Verifiability. Yeah. There's fool's gold, pyrite. Like, it's very difficult to verify whether it's real gold. It's fungible. Gold is fungible. That's good. It's probably more fungible. It's the only aspect where it's better than Bitcoin, because gold is truly fungible. Bitcoin is not truly fungible. And it's kind of so these were the shortcomings, and because of this reason, people started putting gold into vaults and issuing paper currency, which was more portable, it was more divisible, it was more verifiable, right? And that was the beginning of the corruption of humanity's money, because over time they realized that, hey, we can just print more of these pieces of paper, even if not, regardless of how much physical gold we have in a vault. And then ultimately, we just get rid of the gold and just kind of have the paper money floating around. So kind of coming the full circle now back to Bitcoin, what Bitcoin has done is it has solved portability, right? It's inconceivable to think of a more portable money than Bitcoin. You literally remember 12 words and you can just cross a border with nothing but the shirt on your back, and you can transport millions or billions of dollars if you want, right? It's perfectly portable. It's perfectly portable. There's no way to improve on it. It's perfectly verifiable, right? And it's perfectly divisible into quadrillions of sats, right? So you've solved all the shortcomings of gold. So this is what I say in the book. So Bitcoin has made the original rationale for fiat redundant. You don't need fiat anymore. If you go back in time, if you had Bitcoin, there wouldn't have been any need for fiat. So that's kind of what it really is. It's a perfect money. It's the perfect money ever created by humanity, evaluated based on the timeless properties that monies have needed to satisfy. So yeah, that's kind of, I think so. So when you start the economics discussion, you got to start with that. And it's necessary to look at monetary history. It's necessary to think about how we got here, the arc of monetary history, where you started with barter, then you move to grain, other commodities, then you move to precious metals, then you move to paper backed by precious metals, then you move to paper backed by nothing at all. That's the sequence. Some will disagree with that, of course, but just for simplicity, that is the progression. So people need to understand that history in order to appreciate what Bitcoin has achieved.
A fiat money system, a debt-based fiat money system, can only survive if constantly more units of this money are being created, right? To pay nominally on paper the old debt that was created, to I would argue pretend that the fiat money has any value, because real things in the world are being created with the money, right? That's how I would describe that. And you talk about it, that it's a hidden tax. Other people say inflation is theft. Why do you think our generation is especially ignorant about this, but also vulnerable at the same time? Like, just not understanding money, not understanding what is happening around them, third parties having influence over the value of their money and therefore their time and energy and life, basically.
Yeah, you've grown up in this fiat world. It's all you've seen. You're just told by intelligent people, intelligent, powerful people that, you need to target 2% inflation. That is the right way to be. Keynesian economics is the best way to, run the global economy. And you just assume it. You just assume that is correct, and you take it for granted. So, I mean, again, it comes back to the whole point of my book, which was, you have to ask those first principles questions. What is money? You need to start from there. You need to question fundamentals. You need to question those assumptions, and you need to be open-minded. You might not like what you see or what you learn as a result of that process, but you need to be open to that.
There are a lot of people that can, or at least they attempt to explain fiat money, even central bankers or people like Janet Yellen, I think, or even Jamie Dimon. Was it Jamie Dimon or Jerome Powell in certain hearings couldn't even explain why 2% exists, which is fascinating, right? Because when you think about a protocol set of rules, it should be interpreted the same by everyone, explainable the same by everyone, right? But I think that could already be a signal for people to kind of challenge this system of money, because there is no straight set of rules, right? There are goals, 2% inflation. Now in the US, even they talk about, well, maybe we should let that target go. Why shouldn't it be 3%, right? And then there's even people that say, why shouldn't it be 10%? We just can create money infinitely, right? Just that fact alone, I think, is a very interesting contradiction with how Bitcoin is, in a sense, because that protocol is also immutable, because that is the concept of this money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, so what we have is a centrally planned monetary policy. Right, and central planning is a creation of socialism, communism. I mean, it's basically has its origins in Karl Marx and Lenin. This is where central planning was originally proposed, right? So we've gradually moved into centrally planned money, and when you have centrally planned money, you have the death of the free market, right? And when the free market dies, you have all kinds of misaligned incentives. You have moral hazard, and we're seeing that, right, during COVID, well, even now, right? I mean, nothing trades on fundamentals anymore. Everything trades on the back of whatever the printers of the money have to say, right? The central planners of the money have to say, and that's a group of 7 or 8 bureaucrats sitting in Washington, D.C., and making decisions that impact the value of your portfolio tomorrow, for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, upon your retirement. That is centrally planned, and there's very little that's, free market economics based, about that. And as you say, this is all driven by, sort of the whole Keynesian model relies on debt. You need to be able to spend future hypothetical productivity today. You need to borrow from the future to spend today in order to keep this hamster wheel running, right? You need that, because otherwise it all falls apart. So you need debt. And now you have $40 trillion almost US national debt, which, I think Stan Druckenmiller said that if you take into account unfunded entitlements in the US, the national debt is more like $200 trillion, actually, right? Debt to GDP, like whatever, over 120%, deficits of 8+%. So this is, and this is, by the way, the country that's issuing the global reserve asset.
If you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want. Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read. And it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. Let's talk about something that not a lot of people think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with Stampseed. It's an elegant all-in-one titanium plate solution with no separate pieces to lose or manage. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, Stampseed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. When you order a titanium seed plate from Stampseed, you can also upload a custom design or your logo to customize the back of your plate to make it fully personalized. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with Stampseed for decades to come. Visit stampseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to get 15% off your order.
We are witnessing some big shifts right now, right? I mean, the US dollar has now the lowest share of global reserves. The lowest share, it has the lowest share in 30 years. I think, 42%. It's fallen to 42% a few days ago, which was last seen in the early 1990s, I think. And gold has now moved to second place. It's overtaken the euro as a global reserve asset. And it's the highest share of global reserves, again, since like the early 90s or maybe the 80s. So these are big shifts that are taking place. People are starting to call the bluffs. I think the bluff, particularly recent months and recent weeks, things are changing. There's something definitely afoot. So I think we are at the precipice of potentially some big global, macro, events on the sovereign debt stage.
In the case of the US, it's paying old debt with new debt, or basically paying interest on old debt, not principal, right? By the creation of new debt.
The power wielded by these central planners at the Federal Reserve and other central banks is so immense at this point in time. It's pretty crazy, actually, if you think about it. And one of the best manifestations of that, like I was saying, is the death of the free market is where bad news becomes good news, right? In my book, I quote this headline from the Wall Street Journal, which I think came out while I was writing the book, but there are many like it. But it says that stocks plummet in response to positive economic data, right? And you see that all the time, right? But it's basically the reason for that, of course, is that positive economic data means the Fed is probably not gonna cut rates,
create liquidity,
right? Create liquidity, and so the stocks plummet. Rather than, it should be the other way around, right? It's like, and people say it ironically, like the Wall Street Journal just printed it like it was obvious. It's like people are not even flinching anymore when you see something completely outrageous like that. But that's we live in this complete clown world where fundamentals don't matter anymore. The free market is pretty much like dead, and everything runs on dollar liquidity.
So maybe this is a nice bridge to the third dimension in your book, which is politics, which talks about sovereignty and state power. And so when we just described or talked about how governments basically influence or have a monopoly on the money that the citizens in a country are forced to use, right? So you mentioned free market, but there's also no free market in money, right? There's no free competition of monies like there was back in history that, we also mentioned. People were constantly trying to figure out what would be the money with the best characteristics and etc. So the state basically has a monopoly on issuing the money, determining the value of the money, right? Tracking the money and all these things. When Bitcoin is now introduced, how does that change this monopoly on money? Or perhaps what is the opportunity for change, and is that something you think we are already seeing?
Yeah, so again, when it's centrally planned, it's subject to abuse by the central planners, right? And it's not just the abuse of the money. You can abuse the money itself by printing, by inflating it, but what you see is in many parts of the world, the entire financial system is weaponized against the citizens, right? And there's all these statistics. I think over 75% of the world lives under some degree of an authoritarian regime and some degree of an authoritarian state, where the financial system, that should be working for them, the financial system that you and I and people like us living in a very privileged Western environment, we just take it for granted. But people live, 2/3, 3/4 of the world lives in systems where it's like actively weaponized against them on a day-to-day basis. And when that happens, there's no other option. There's nowhere to go. You can't store your money in gold bars and hide it under your bed, because you're going to have the authorities come and take it from you. Anything physical can be taken from you. Anything on the bank can be frozen instantly. If you say something that goes against the state that someone doesn't like, your bank account gets frozen. And then you have Bitcoin, right? Where all you need is access to the internet. You open a wallet. And even if you don't have access to the internet, you can transact using SMS messages, ham radio, but you pretty much have all these countries have access to the internet, and nobody can stop you. You can earn money and you can convert it into Bitcoin, and you can store it in this global currency that nobody can inflate, nobody can confiscate from you, and nobody needs to even know that you have. That is so powerful. It is the most powerful instrument ever created, that humans can use against authoritarian states. There's never been anything more powerful than this, where it's a non-violent movement. It's a non-violent secret movement against the state. The state doesn't even need to know it's not going to even know that you are gradually defunding it by removing the value that you would otherwise store within its system, by extracting it and putting it into this cyberspace asset. That's incredibly powerful.
And this ties into, I think, the word incentives, right? The quality of the money determines the quality of the incentives. And so the only real true vote that you can vote on is the money, right? So when you leave the money that you're basically forced to use, or, well, you think you're forced to use, right? That is, I think, a signal by itself that you should pay attention to. But when you switch from one system to another system, when I realized that's basically when I went all in, right? Like, okay, I'm participating in this monetary system that I don't really understand and other people have control over, and I can basically move everything that I gathered into this other system that I can actually verify for myself, where I can have true ownership, where this asset is my true property, right? So that is great, but a lot of people fear or think that governments can ban Bitcoin, but as we talked about, this is a protocol for money. Like, can you ban math or the English language? Like the answer, or the rules of chess, right? Like the answer is no, obviously. But yeah, how can people think about that? Because
Sure.
I would say it's a strong argument and a logical reasoning. And also, I'd say it illustrates to a degree the level of, the struggle, the battle, the challenge that we are in with regard to separating money and state.
Sure. So there's I always say there's some irony in people raising the concern that governments will ban Bitcoin. Oh my God, as if people didn't think about that. They missed. It's ironic because Bitcoin was created with the assumption that it would be banned, right? Satoshi was trying to disrupt central banking. He was trying to disrupt money itself. And the assumption there is that it will be attacked, right? Satoshi was thinking about Executive Order 6102 in 1933, April 5th, where FDR confiscated physical gold from American citizens, right? We know that Satoshi was thinking about that because 6102 is all over the Bitcoin protocol, right? The difficulty adjustment adjusts every 2016 blocks, which is 6102 in reverse, right? Satoshi's like pseudonymous, his birthday is April 5th, which is the day, which is, when the day on which Order 6102 was passed. He was trying to create unconfiscatable gold. In other words, the primary thing he was thinking about was attacks by governments. And that was the whole point of decentralization. If it's decentralized, you have no CEO to put in jail. You have no bank accounts to freeze. There's nothing you can do. There's no attack vector, right? That was the whole point of it. That was the whole point of not having a founder, the pseudonymous founder who's just mysteriously disappeared. No other crypto has that. It's an incredible achievement in just being able to completely vanish the way he's vanished. That immaculate conception, just like gold. Gold doesn't have a founder. Ergo, digital gold also shouldn't have a founder. And Satoshi has achieved that. But those are, sort of, that's the decentralization. But another aspect is Bitcoin runs on the TCP/IP protocol of the internet, which is the base layer of the internet, right? There is no way to stop any transaction on the TCP/IP protocol, right? The only way to stop it is by actually shutting down the entire internet. And that's obviously not economically viable in any given country. You can't just shut down the internet, right? But even if you shut down the internet, you can, like I mentioned, you can still transact in, SMS messages and ham radio, and there's Blockstream satellite and so on and so forth. So it's literally impossible to shut it down. And, governments shutting it down is not hypothetical. It's happened in Nigeria. It's happened in China, right? And these countries are actually the countries where you've got some of the highest levels of adoption of Bitcoin, right? Because people just move into the peer-to-peer level, right? And again, unless you're telling people about it and not practicing good privacy policies, no one's going to know about it and no one can stop you. That is true censorship resistance. And then the final point for people still worried about, governments shutting it down is game theory, right? The idea that every single government on the planet is going to, ban Bitcoin and stop Bitcoin, in concert is ludicrous, right? There's countries like El Salvador that have actually adopted it as legal tender. The horse has left the stable. You're never going to be able to ban Bitcoin in El Salvador, right? And if other countries, there will always be some countries that look at it opportunistically, right? They will say, okay, so if the US and, other Europe and, Asia ban Bitcoin, billions and billions of dollars are going to go into El Salvador, and all of a sudden it's going to become the new Switzerland. Okay. Then you think, Guatemala or Costa Rica next door is going to just sit by and watch what's happening. Of course, they're going to open their door to Bitcoin as well, and everyone migrates, and that also becomes a safe haven. And so game theory, again, will ensure that there is literally there's zero possibility of Bitcoin being banned across the board. And I mean, frankly, in the United States, if you still think that where we, at this point in time, Bitcoin has been approved as a spot ETF for retail distribution by, the SEC. The President of America has talked about it being a reserve asset. There is literally, it would be unconstitutional. There is no legal way in which Bitcoin can be banned in America. It's sitting in pension funds, retirement accounts. It's politically unfeasible to ban Bitcoin in America. So people who still talk about it, really sort of, they're just not really applying their mental faculties to the reality. I mean, it's really a ridiculous suggestion at this point in time to even suggest that Bitcoin can be globally banned, Yeah.
so many thoughts here, but yeah, I think that this goes back to the word incentives, right? I mean, even today I saw a chart of, I think it's China or the BRICS. They're crazily like buying gold. We touched upon gold, and I'm always thinking like, okay, the people that should know about this, I cannot imagine that. I mean, I'm not a Wall Street lawyer, right? But like, I think I'm a general pleb, right? Like, if I figure this out, all these people have to figure this out. Maybe a bit later, but at some point, it is their job to fucking know, right? So if they think it's a great idea to buy gold, they will love Bitcoin when they understand what this is, right? Like, if I just cannot imagine a world where that doesn't exist. I think that's one.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And just to say, I mean, people, it's not like the people in governments are some kind of different species. They're all people just like us. They're humans just like us, right? They have families. Many of them are making not a lot of money. You know, government jobs are not very well paying, right? So, I mean, sure, there's maybe an elite class of people, like maybe the, you know, Davos attendees every year who pull all the strings. But otherwise, like most people working in governments are just regular people, like, you know, like us. So, yeah.
I mean, and they, that's always my thought, right? Like same as with big institutions or, well, yes, the government is just made up of these individuals that, you know, when it's 5 p.m. and they go home and they need to go to the grocery store and they realize, you know, a watermelon is $15 or something, they're going to be like, what am I doing? Like, what is happening here? Right. And I think they will realize it very late, but there will be a point where they either get that there's something wrong or they're going to be stuck in some CBDC jail, right? Like, I think that's also a possibility, but I fully agree with you. And that is also, I think, that's the other point I wanted to make is, again, people need to understand the level of the battle that we're in, the time this is going to take for people to wake up to not only understanding this is a very short experiment, this money, but this money is a very predatory money, right? It creates a lot of bad incentives that lower the quality of food and medicine and products and services and all these things. Yeah. And that, I think, is so, like we talked about, it's just very hard for people to either see the problem first and then, you know, before they would even go to a solution that we obviously think is Bitcoin, right? But this is going to take some time. Like, I honestly think we are probably doing this, what we're doing now, more for our children or maybe even our children's children, rather than our peers. Although I would love to, you know, reach more millennials, but I just think, I think you need to zoom out. Like, a lot of people need to zoom out more and just understand this is not an easy feat.
Yeah. The problem is that consumerism is addictive, right? Keynesian economics, you know, debt driven spending fuels consumerism, and consumerism is addictive. People have gotten addictive to just spending money, spending the future today. And if you take that away from them, they're not going to react well. So that's why I think things will get a lot worse before they get better. It's not possible for things to all of a sudden magically improve. Things will have to burn down, you know, to a large extent before things can be built again. And, you know, that's the problem with the democratic system. It's just not compatible, right? Because, you know, centrally planned money is not compatible with democracy because, you know, the government will always put in place loose fiscal and monetary policies in order to get reelected. We're seeing that right now in America, right? There's you know, this what's his Alexander Tytler? Have you ever read? He's a Scottish.
Yes, the cycle.
Yeah. He says.
Wait. So for people to look this up, I think Tytler, I think, is either TYTLER or TITLER.
And it's TITLER.
Yeah. And so it's a cycle through which societies go, but it's long, right? Like, this is a 200, 300 year cycle, basically.
It's one of my favorite quotes. So he says, democracy can never exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the majority realizes that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. And from that point on, things just devolve into voting for the government that spends the most money on the people. And the end result being all the money has been spent, the people have been ruined, and democracy has been destroyed. And then he says that throughout history, civilizations move through different phases. They move from bondage to to spirituality, from spirituality to great courage, from great courage to great liberty, from liberty to abundance, right? And then from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to complacency, from complacency to dependence, and then from dependence back into bondage. And the process starts again.
But we have to make clear the bondage actually leads to a struggle or a fight, right? The bondage and the spirituality create something that people are willing to die for, is what he's also saying, right? So that culminates in a huge battle eventually, right? And when you say complacency or dependency, the dependency part is where we are, right? Like at least in my country, or like in Europe, or well, in the UK, it is, the government has to fix this. Like the littlest incidents, things you see that are on the news, people are like, there should be a policy for that. The politicians should talk about that, right? Everyone is pointing to the government, which again are just individual people that are not necessarily always the best in their craft, right? Or else they would be doing that. So they should solve it.
There's that line, actually, he wrote this, I forget, like the 1800s or maybe 1700s, like
not
hundreds
sure,
of years ago. The modern equivalent, which I think is from The Fourth Turning, or I forget where it's from, but strong men make good times, good times make weak men make hard times make strong men, and then strong men make good times. That's a shorter version of what Alexander, but I think he was the first one to actually write that.
Yeah, late 1700s. It's from. And it talks about this cycle being 200 years. So I think this is a nice bridge to the last part that we can discuss, which is the philosophy part of your book. And I think you just touched upon, consumption driven. People have a high time preference, right? So the velocity of money is very high. People are spending. There's a lot of degenerate behavior and stuff like that. Where, when we think about Bitcoin, it's actually the opposite, right? It incentivizes a low time preference, a preference for being frugal, saving. Because when you understand you have ownership of a money that's superior to any other asset that you could use to save for your future, right? To basically, I always say, like, lower the uncertainty towards your future, the uncertainty that already exists for everyone, as in, you could die tomorrow, right? Once you understand you own that, you're going to question, should I spend my money that I own actually? Whereas, with fiat money, there's not really even a place for reflection, because everything you own today is worth the most today. So you basically have to spend that money. So what do you think Bitcoin could bring in a sense of, shifting that time preference, and what does that actually mean within kind of like the structure that we're currently in?
Yeah, so time preference is basically, instant gratification. Do you want instant gratification, or are you okay with delayed gratification? And as we discussed, Keynesian economics, where it's debt-driven, inflation-driven, it encourages you to spend today, get that instant gratification, and kick the can down the road, right? to later in your own life, but more likely future generations, right? That's what Keynesian economics encourages. And the opposite of that is what a hard money system encourages, which is gold historically, but Bitcoin is an opportunity to move back into that hard money era, right? So consumerism is essentially it's what results from it is it has a negative impact on food, architecture, the environment, and it's this vicious cycle that will continue until civilization, culture, and the environment and the planet have been completely consumed and destroyed by it, right? And so you have to put the brakes on, and there's no way to put the brakes on. And in many ways, if you think about it, it's literally only Bitcoin, because you go back to gold, you're back to the original, you're going back in time again, a system that's already proven that it can be abused, a system that has failed, right? Some would disagree, gold didn't fail. The fact that it lent itself to, the Nixon shock is a failure. It was not, it was not, or the Order 6102, the fact that it allowed itself to be confiscated is a failure. And Bitcoin will not fail on that particular account because it's confiscation resistant. But yeah, in the book I talk about poor food quality, right? Architecture. You look around. There's no kind of London. As I was talking to Danny Knowles yesterday, and we were talking about how London is a perfect example of that, where you have beautiful historic architecture. Probably have that in Amsterdam as well, and then juxtaposed with that, you have these ugly buildings that have been built over the last 20, 30 years. And it's what's referred to as planned obsolescence, right? You don't build buildings for generations or hundreds or thousands of years. You build them until the next fashionable thing comes along, and then you demolish it and then you rebuild again. So it's planned obsolescence. You plan for it to become obsolete. And so it's low quality, it's flimsy, it's ugly, right? And so these are the products of it. It's all pervasive. It's not, people think, people are often shocked by it. When I tell people that my book talks about, there's a section on architecture, there's a section on food. In a Bitcoin book, what are you talking about? How does Bitcoin have anything to do with that, right? But it is really, money is all pervading. It's all pervasive. It impacts everything in society. It is the lifeblood of humanity, and the corruption of money corrupts society and civilization and culture to its core. And frankly, for all the reasons we discussed, Bitcoin as a non-confiscatable, censorship-proof, censorship-resistant, permissionless, scarce digital commodity is frankly the only way out of this system.
When you think about it like that, yeah, the conclusion of Bitcoin is inevitable, at least to a certain degree. I think it's not an illogical one.
Yeah, and it's I think one of the big pitfalls again is with people is one of the big blocks in appreciating this is it's hard to understand that Bitcoin is a once in history invention. It cannot be replicated. That irreplicability of Bitcoin is something very hard to grasp. And I spent, I tried to kind of encapsulate this in the book, and I thought of, about inventions. You think about inventions through time, and I realized that there are broadly two kinds of inventions. Yeah, there's excuse me. There's inventions like the wheel, right? And so the wheel was what I would call a foundational invention, because it was complete at inception. The wheel that a caveman used for the first time to drag something like a bison or something like that, is the same from a principles perspective. It's the same thing as the Tesla, driving on the road outside, right? There's no room for improvement of that concept of the wheel, right? It's a complete invention. Then you take an automobile, right? An automobile, the first time the prototype was created, I think Carl Benz in Germany, and then, Henry Ford came along. He created the what's it called? Like, the assembly line for manufacturing cars. And then there's all these developments. And now there's EVs and self-driving cars and all. It's a constantly evolving thing. That is not a foundational invention. Something was created and then it kept evolving over time, right? It's two categories of invention. A magnetic compass, right, is like the wheel. It's a foundation. It is complete at the time of creation, right? The nail was a great invention as well, right? I think in ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, complete at the time of invention and whatever creation. But cell phones, computers, they are like constantly evolving. They are not foundational inventions. So I in my book, I talk about two categories of invention. So one category is complete and final at the time of creation. The other one is constantly being built upon and evolving, right? Which category is Bitcoin? Is it the first or is it the second, right? And I would say that it is in the first category. And more specifically, I'm not talking about, CTV covenants or you upgrading the protocol to be quantum resistant, all those things. I'm talking about the invention of digital scarcity. That was a path-dependent, one-time invention, just like the wheel or the automobile. There's no room to improve upon it by making it faster or better or this or that. It's not. It is complete. It is final and complete. And many people struggle with that idea, right? Yeah. Another analogy is as if Bitcoin is almost like a new element on the periodic table, right? It's like this new element that was created and it cannot be replicated. So you have to understand that. And how does Bitcoin achieve that? It achieves it goes way beyond the C++ code. And that's the point, right? It's about path dependency. It's about network effects. It's about the immaculate conception that we talked about, right? It's about the Lindy effect. For every day that Bitcoin remains as it is, as the most dominant economic singularity in the digital world, it gets stronger and stronger, right? As this guy, Ryan DeKerber, wrote in 2011, this paper called The Economic Singularity, where he talks about how ultimately money is a zero-sum game. You're not going to have all monetary value will converge on the most secure monetary network, ultimately. And that is Bitcoin, right? Yeah. And people struggle with that. They're like, oh, but there's going to be this new technology that comes along that improves upon it. You can't improve upon it, right? And that's where you get to the 10x improvement rule. To disrupt an incumbent, your new technology, the disruptor needs to be at least 10 times better than the incumbent, okay? Otherwise, it's not going to disrupt it. It's not going to displace it from being the incumbent. Bitcoin is now the incumbent, right? So you'd have to create something with 10 times better monetary properties than Bitcoin. It's impossible, right? We talked about it. Portability, it's perfection when it comes to portability. Divisibility, it's perfection when it comes to verifiability, is perfection. Scarcity, it's perfection. It is perfect money already, right? Yeah. So you can't improve upon it, let alone create a 10x improvement in order to displace it. And so the only conclusion, it is a path-dependent, one-time invention. Bitcoin is the wheel, not the automobile, right? And I think that is something that people find it quite hard to understand. And the reason for that is if you come from my background, right, traditional finance, if you're an investor, asset manager or something, you are, used to investment decks, like, kind of like a startup presents to you, so like an investor deck. And there's always a few slides on competitor analysis, right? You're always thinking, oh, but someone else is going to come in with a better fly trap and they're going to displace, they're going to disrupt. Yeah. And so you're wired, you're paid to think in that way. You're paid to think about competitors. And so they often just go down this path and they shitcoin and then they're lost. But what you need to do is first spend some time on this and study the economic incentives, study the protocols, study all these forces that come together to make Bitcoin a once-in-history invention, like network effects, Metcalfe's law, Lindy effect, 10x improvement rule, the Schelling points, right? These are all things you need to study and understand how they apply to Bitcoin.
Just to wrap up, I want to first thank you for this deep dive. I really hope people find this valuable, and I would encourage everyone to also get the book. I think you are very deep down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and there's a lot to learn from how you think about it and how you talk about it. So I would recommend anyone to get the book. I'll link to it in the show notes. But to wrap up, I want to ask you a question that I ask everyone. I ask the same question, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
I think pursuit of truth is a core belief, and that's, I think, everyone's purpose in life is the relentless pursuit of truth, and that goes in your own self-realization, the way you treat your friends, the way you treat your family, and so on. And to tie it with Bitcoin, it's don't trust in numbers, and numbers verify, verifiable mathematics is what is real truth. And so I think maybe that's why Bitcoin has always, maybe one of the reasons why it's resonated so much with me, because it is the pursuit of absolute truth. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, that's a great ender. Thanks again. And I appreciate your time and appreciate your knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you, Bram. It was a real pleasure chatting with you. So thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.